have mercy, look at how the time goes.
3, 2, 1, and welcome everybody to this episode of the Coming Home Podcast with John Allen. I am your host, John Allen. I just want to say before I get started with this discussion, if any of y'all want to send me an email, if you have any questions, if you have any suggestions, comments, whatever, you can send me an email to john@johnallenpod.com. And that is JOHNALANPOD.com. The Coming Home Podcast with John Allen. And today I'm speaking with Miss Liane Thompson. Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
You know what? I am doing fantastic. This is pretty cool. I am so glad to be talking to you right now. We kind of met in the sense that you were in the audience when I did my previous stand-up show in Oslo. But because of the seating, it was a sold out night, but because of the seating, you were in the back, in the what would you call that? In the courtyard, I guess, behind the venue.
Yeah. Because
of the seating arrangement. So you didn't get to see me, I didn't get to see you, but we contacted each other afterwards, and here we sit.
Yeah. No, I mean, I actually went to that event to see you specifically. I had read about that you were, a comedian and being new to Oslo and all. I wanted to, first of all, I love humor. I mean, who doesn't? And wanted to see your act. And so I went there. I didn't have a ticket, tried to get tickets, whatever. And they said, no, it's sold out, with COVID and all, not a chance. And then the bartender said, hey, well, we have the courtyard. You can't see the stage, but you can hear the stage.
Yeah.
And I was like, good for me. I like sitting outside anyway. So that's what we did. And we got right to the door so I could still hear. It was, I'm happy I caught.
No, I was going to say, that's news to me that you went there specifically to see my act. I didn't know that. I thought you were just there for the evening, but you came specific. Wow. I'm flattered. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I went specifically to see your act. I was like, I want to see this guy's act. And I even got a treat because I didn't realize that you also sang so beautifully. And I was like, oh my God. Okay, this is my new best friend, right?
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I did. I kind of broke away from the planned routine, and I ended up singing a cappella at the end. That was an interesting night, but thank you for those compliments. But we are here to talk about you. I want to compliment you, Liane. I think that what you're doing with Aquaai is incredibly fascinating. I've been looking at these videos on YouTube, looking at this mechanical fish. And it's you would think going back to maybe the days of my childhood, if you had a toy or something that was supposed to be a fish, it would just be this hard, inflexible object with a propeller in the back. But you have a automated fish, and it actually swims like a fish. Looking at it, I would think that the fish would be fooled by this imposter.
They are.
And I think that what Aquaai is trying to do, your company Aquaai, what you are trying to do, what you are doing is it's good work, good intentions, good results. Can you tell me what Aquaai stands for? What are you guys doing? What is your purpose?
Sure. So Aquaai actually was born out of a child. And one little girl in particular who grew up in her father's lab while he made robots and gadgets and so forth, and had actually watched her dad build at least 10 2-meter tall robots to, he was inspired by Westworld growing up and fell in love with robots and was building robots. This is taking us back 15 years ago to study robot-human interaction. So he was building them. And he was a kind of a guy who had a lab next to his house. So his daughter grew up in the lab. And one day she went to school and she learned about the ocean crisis. And she came home and she said, "Hey, Dad, enough with the land robots. We really need to build something to save the seas." And so that's why it's Aquaai, saving the seas. So that, and he promised her, like all good dads do, yeah, okay, let's do this. Because, you're so charming and you're my kid, and I can't tell you no. And then what was interesting about it is that he actually took that promise to heart and started to investigate about the systems that were being used in the ocean. He's originally from South Africa. Grew up with, I think the only toy he had in the orphanage was a ball, and he understood the beauty and the simplicity about mechanics and machines. That's why he built them, and always was building machines to save, humanity, to help humanity, that would be simple, that could be used across the world. And he also, coincidentally, was somewhat of a climate change expert. So in looking at what was out there, he said, we need to come up with systems that can withstand the future superstorms, or I should say the ones that we now see today.
Yes.
And it needs to be, he came out of a special effects background, worked in film in South Africa, had built even a museum of animatronics at one point. So everything kind of came together with that promise. You never know when you're doing things starting in life, how later they all kind of come together and have a special meaning. So he took all of those years of knowledge and diversification of knowledge and came up with a system that he believed was needed in order to, save the seas, to withstand superstorms, to be used in scenarios across multiple industries, if you will. And that was the robotic fish. So The idea is that it looks Mother Nature got it right. It looks and swims like a fish. It can go fast and long distance like a tuna. It can move around like a clownfish around coral reefs if need be, with the flight and flee turn.
Yeah, like I said, looking at the videos, it looks like a fish. It does not look like a robot. It looks and moves like a fish. Fascinating. Yeah. That's some great technology that's been put into that. I don't understand those things, but I can see it and I can appreciate the technology that has gone into that. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I think especially unique is that it's really affordable. So what we've managed to do is create that system so that it can indeed be used, across industries, because it is so affordable. Our patents are in the mechanics and design, and there are other robot fish out there being built for different reasons. Our whole mandate is ocean tech for positive impact. So we're really, really hardcore and staying true to that mission in terms of how the technology, or for what the technology is being used. In the case of a startup, because, what happened was I actually met this individual that we're talking about who designed the robot fish.
Now let's say his name. His name is Simeon. What's his last name?
His name is Simeon Peterkowski.
Yeah. From South Africa. So he's the man behind the actual technology, the animatronics and the design of this fish, correct?
Yeah, he's the mind behind the machine.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. As I like to say. I met him in Israel.
Well.
And I was actually, so my background, I was a journalist. I also, did radio and print and television. And I was actually in Israel when I met Simeon. I was doing a story on the Q, as in James Bond 007 Q. After a lifetime of bonds, I finally said, I'm going to go for a Q.
There you go.
Hardest thing I could do. Yeah. Much happier. So, so my Q was and is Simeon. And when I met him, he was obsessing about the proof of concept, about this fish. And long story short, I broke all the rules and had a thing with my subject. And when we came to my native, so I'm originally from the U.S. I was, born and raised in California and Idaho. And, I'd lived, obviously, when I was with the New York Times, quite a while in New York. So when we came back to the U.S., my native, we did a stint in New York. I, for about a year, did some media consulting, and then I was like, okay, I don't want to do media anymore. I also had a difficult time kind of reconnecting with that whole industry, having been out in the Middle East for a good decade. I'd had companies in the Middle East and stuff. And so I just said, okay, hey, why don't we take the thing, one of your inventions, of which you had many, and the one you care the most about, and let's make a company, Aquaai, and let's both dedicate our time to something really positive. We'd seen so much as a conflict reporter, and I was in Haiti also right after the earthquake. I just seen so much of the worst in humanity and the most beautiful aspects.
Right. I can imagine. Yeah.
And I said, let's just dedicate our time to doing something really positive. Coming from California, clearly I had a relationship with the ocean, but I was never, I was a scuba diver. I am a scuba diver, and so and Simeon, coming from Cape Town, he grew up on a longboard. I mean, he was always surfing. Yeah. So it just kind of came together, and
but maybe there was some, well, I can imagine that would be a drastic change. You probably had a moment of anxiety, whether that anxiety was positive or negative. I would imagine you had a moment of stress, more or less, to go from your journalistic background and start walking towards a future in tech, in startup. There's I don't see much of a connection between those things. To me, that is a fascinating jump. Can you tell me about that process? Where did you get the guts to do that?
Okay, so it's not my first startup.
Oh, okay.
When I was finishing grad school in Washington, D.C., I had aspirations. I wanted to be the next Christiana Amanpour, and being a foreign correspondent, seeing the world. I always, my impetus was on travel, and I knew I didn't want to wear a suit. So international business wasn't going to happen for me.
No.
And so journalism kind of came natural. I was a good storyteller, and so I just found myself doing that and, going to different places. I'd already driven, in terms of risk and guts. I drove from San Francisco to Honduras and back for 6 months in like a Volkswagen 1974 bus.
Oh, wow.
Right between undergrad and grad school, I didn't know what I was going to do. So I said, hey, with my partner at the time, I said, let's go. And he actually, I'll get back to that, but I said, let's take a trip. And we were going to drive to Brazil. And I was a single mom at the time. My daughter was, I think, turned 5 in Belize. And so we started to drive to Brazil. I got as far as Honduras when I got a scholarship or fellowship to go to school in Washington, D.C. I was really into radio at the time. So, it was the dean of the school used to run a show on NPR. So I was really excited about that. So the guts issue was never a problem.
The guts were there. That's gutsy to drive. That's gutsy
the guts were always there. Then after grad school, I spoke to Easton Jordan, who at the time was the vice president of CNN, and I had been working there. And he said, if you want to be a foreign correspondent, just go be one, and, just go do it. So he was very integral in my, not waiting and working your way up the corporate ladder, but just go. So I moved actually to Budapest in late 93.
Yeah.
Formed a production company with someone I'd met in Germany when I was working at ZDF. And that was, pretty, risky. I went there and, again, a single mom and, and so had that one didn't, work out for different reasons, mostly not very good partnerships with the Hungarian side of things. But then I was picked up there by what became the New York Times.
Okay.
So I had covered areas of risk. I was in Southeast Turkey. I, covered the Balkans, if you will. So that was never an issue. Then when I was in 9/11, at that point in time, I was on staff with the New York Times. And when 9/11 happened, and I remember a good friend of mine who was working also for Reuters, she and I were in the hole. And after that, I at that time, I had already kind of become an executive at the New York Times, and I missed being in the field. And so that was when I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the Middle East. My partner at the time, I was also pregnant with a new child, and the father was Israeli, or is Israeli. And so I made the decision to go to Israel, and then, spent time there, which was also, during the peak of the Intifada. And I think I was on my way to a bus bombing when I went into labor or something.
Yet another example of you having guts already.
So the wasn't it. I think, and then after Haiti, I teamed up with a few other people, and we formed a company. And this was, it was a really cool company. The idea was that you shot through an app on your phone. This is when people started to use their phones all of a sudden. Right? Yeah. So what we learned in Haiti was that, a lot of, everything, the first thing that went up were cell towers. People were, we were finding people on, Twitter basically was saying, hey, there's somebody trapped here. Can you help? All of this was going through like Twitter or through the phone. And so what we learned was, why don't we develop an app where everybody, doesn't matter where you are, shoot through the app, the video comes to our back end, and then we sell it to like Reuters or the usual suspects.
I see. Yeah.
Because my partner, actually, pretty much everything you saw the first initial days out of Haiti were shot by my partner in the company. Who sold the footage to all everything you saw in the news or whatever. So
now, what year are we talking here?
So roughly? 2010. Yeah. 2010 was January 2010 was the earthquake.
Okay.
And, so he was one of the first person to be there and get the first footage out.
That's amazing. Wow. Yeah.
So I actually met him there in Haiti working, and then afterwards we formed a company with a few other Israelis to do this. For whatever reasons, there's a lot of issues in startups. It didn't take off completely at the end. I came back to the U.S. and Simi and I, and that's when I was like, you know what? I looked around at media in the U.S. I was involved with the early stages of reality television. So did some really cool films in Cuba for Showtime, or put Anthony Bourdain on television.
You put Anthony Bourdain on television?
Yeah. Well, me in the New York Times. So yeah.
So, and at that time you were an exec, or fairly high up in the hierarchy there at the New York Times, right?
Yeah, I mean, for the I mean, it sounds really glamorous, but the truth is that I started with a company that was bought out by the New York Times, and they were the first ones one of the first entities to do reality television. Trauma, Life in the R was one of the shows that kind of put them on the map.
I remember that. Yeah. Yeah.
So I was a camera woman, then I was a producer, then a series producer, and then ultimately an executive producer, and went from producing trauma to things like maternity ward, paramedics. I think they had a show, I didn't oversee that one, like Police Force was one, Wall Street, and then we started doing really cool stuff like hours for Showtime. So I did the Cuba Hour, Dreaming a New Cuba. I did Jimmy and Sly, The Skin I'm In.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yes.
Yeah, that was a really one of my. I came in late in the game on that as an executive producer to kind of get it set up, and that was really cool. I loved editing,
Yeah.
to their music and stuff. And
It's so cool that I'm speaking to you and you had something to do with these shows that I remember these shows. And
yeah. So
isn't that amazing that we were able to meet like this? I think it is anyway.
But Anthony was writing his book, Kitchen Confidential, was a hit. So the Times went to him and said, "Hey, if you want to do another, it was I think already at the top, bestsellers list, New York Times bestsellers list." He said, "Well," and Tony's mom, by the way, worked at the Times. She worked a long time there. So they went to him and said, "Why don't you're going to do another book, and why don't we make a TV series out of it?" So I was the executive producer. I was the one assigned to make it happen. The president of New York Times Television, Christian Gwynn, and so we put together a team to go and follow Tony around his tours, which became a cook's tour. And at the team, that we put together, or that we hired, or I should say, which is Lydia Tenalia, and they actually had just gotten married. So their honeymoon was traveling around, I think, Cambodia and Vietnam with Tony. And Tony had never done TV, so it wasn't like the Tony everyone knows and loves. It was like, "Tony, you're going to have to say something when you get off the train."
I can't imagine that, Tony. I cannot imagine that, Anthony Bourdain. I can't do it.
Well, let me just tell you that Lydia and Chris, who are dear friends and still today, are incredibly talented, and they were obviously the obvious people to take to be the series producers on that first series, which aired on the Food Network. And Chris is an amazing writer. Both of them are amazing, cinematographers and producers and people, just real people.
Yeah.
So they built a wonderful relationship with Tony. And even after Tony and them, they left the Times and they formed their own company called Z Productions, I think it is, and continued to make shows on Travel Channel and then ultimately CNN, with Tony. So the short answer is yes, I was this executive and co-creator of the first series with Anthony or Tony. And then, like I said, I had enough and I went to the Middle East and did a couple of more shows, quit the Times, stayed in the Middle East, had a startup, came back to the U.S. and had the startup bug. I mean, I don't know if you know anything about Israel and the startup world, but, they're like number two in the world from Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Instant messaging, which we all use, is an Israeli invention.
That is their thing. Yes, that's true. Not a lot of people think about that, but that is the truth. It all started in Israel. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got bit by the startup bug. What is it that made you, was it a fate type of thing that you just happened to have met Simeon and then his passion kind of infected you and then you went in that direction? Or were you already thinking about doing something that would be good work for the ocean?
Oh, no. I wasn't thinking at all about doing something great for them. Sorry, I'm not going to no. For me, it was, my passion has always been traveling, meeting people. I love to find the beauty and humanity in the worst scenarios. I think some of the most touching moments I've ever witnessed have been in among rubble, if you will.
Yeah.
Either as a metaphor or literally.
Yeah.
So for me, when I met Simeon, who my life was a bit of a rubble at the time when I met him. So it was, call it fate, if you will. But we, he just really had something very, very special about him. He's a very unique individual as a person. I think I mentioned, he kind of, his mom passed when he was maybe 12. He grew up with his brothers in a children's home in Cape Town.
That's a rough start. Heart of gold, tough guy. He looked like Jason Statham when I met him. So he was good looking too. It helps.
He was also, about a decade younger than me. I'm going to put that out there too.
Hey.
Hey, it works, right? No, so he was just also a wonderful father. Really always put, he has his daughter. We have our, he's a stepfather, but he really stepped up and became an amazing father to my children as well.
That's beautiful.
In fact, my daughter looks just like his daughter. They're the same age and everything. So it's
nice. So they have a combined sibling / friendship thing going on there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
And so, when we came to the U.S., I didn't want to do media anymore. It was such a mess. Reality TV had turned to sewage TV.
You guys created a monster. You really did that.
I can't say that I created it. I have to give those kudos to the people, before me. But I proliferated it.
There you go. That's the word. Proliferated. That's a hard.
What we did though was real. It wasn't the stuff now. It wasn't like, how can we find the lowest denominator in the United States society and put that and show that it's okay to be disgusting and rude and belligerent. And, I think it's where some of those early, those talk shows, those early ones, the Jerry Springer meets reality, kind of it was a convergence of the two ideas. Because when we did it, it was verite, it was interesting.
Yes.
Not flying on the wall. It was much more Maisel-ish as opposed to,
Well, now it's just a bunch of garbage that's being put out for entertainment, and it appeals to the lowest primal instincts that we have. It's garbage. And what really bothers me is that people aren't just being entertained by it. Now we're seeing the younger generation using it as a guideline for how they should live their lives. It's terrible. I see a lot of Norwegians who look at American reality TV, and now they're starting to think that that's how Americans are.
Well, I mean,
we are. Some of us are, obviously.
Look at our society right now. Do you think somebody as disgusting as Donald Trump, who I refuse to put the P word in front of, could hold that office if it hadn't have been? I don't think he would have been able to get that office had it not have already been a social devolution.
Well, his brand of reality TV made it cool. It made it kind of okay to be an asshole, to say it straight up. And that, for some reason that I can't understand, appealed to people. I totally get the thing that Americans were ready for a quote unquote non-politician. I get that. I was ready for that as well. But this guy, really? There was something about his brand of reality TV that made it okay to be a jerk, made it okay to be a jackass. And for some reason, people wanted to be led by a person like that. I don't understand it. And I say this without, I'm not going to be like Hillary Clinton and call them a basket of deplorables, but I do question their thought process. I don't understand how they could have voted for that man.
Well, I think it's, let's talk about that, because it is a societal, change, which is, as societies do, they're constantly changing and evolving. Or in this case,
Sure.
not for the best. If you take away basics from humanity, whether it's education, right? So let's talk about who's getting an education, who's not getting an education, and you're depriving the mind. So if you're depriving the mind, you're depriving basic things like, how can I feed my family? Now, I have 5 brothers and sisters, and I can ask, and my dad had a tire shop. Yeah, so I grew up around tires. I love the smell of a garage. What can I say? We used to play hide and seek and stack all those tires in the tire shop. But no, so I asked my dad. I said, "Hey, Dad," and he worked for himself. So he quit being a general manager of Goodyear or whatever to, we moved like every year because he would open different shops and then get it up and running, and we'd move another year. So like by the time I was 12, I think I'd gone to 7 different schools or something like that. So, and then he quit that and he opened his own tire shop in Idaho, in Coeur d'Alene, and that's, what brought us up to Idaho. And I asked him, did you have so much? You have 5 kids to feed. I mean, we had a nice house. My mom drove an MG Sports, convertible, and, it wasn't like he didn't have wasn't a doctor or a lawyer, and we were okay. And all had health insurance, as far as I remember. And he said, the United States has become so different from the place that he grew up, the place I grew up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And when you deprive so much of just basics to humans, they'll do anything to get theirs.
So do you think the people of, or at least that base that supports the Donald Trump, do you think they were just squeezed for so hard for so long that they wanted a change and they didn't really put much thought into what kind of a change or what kind of a person would be the face of that change? Do you think that's it? Desperation? They were squeezed so hard for so long?
That, and clearly idolization. I think that, what you always did get was the ability to turn on your telly. So if you're fed, I fundamentally, hands down, do believe in brainwashing.
Oh, sure.
Possible. And I do feel that the long play by entities like Fox News that has been going on for decades has infiltrated the minds. Yeah. And this is coming from media that, if you're told something long enough, you're going to start believing it.
Sure.
And one of the key things in propaganda is you always take part of the truth and kind of skew it a little bit. It's not like you make up something completely, preposterous. You take the truth and you just skew it.
Yeah.
And that has been going on for generations. I think also just, the what's happened in terms of the lack of, the dissolve of the middle class, when you see so much of the middle class, kind of the separation between the rich and the poor, the 1%, the haves and the have-nots, and those haves are all coming out of places like Silicon Valley or, through tech, and you're not having access in your education to have the ability to even understand that you can do this too. A lot of that is, I can do that.
You mentioned the propaganda machine, and in almost in the same sentence, you mentioned Fox News. What do you say to the people who are listening to Fox News, and those people say, well, CNN does the same thing. It's just on the other side. What do you say to those people? Personally, I don't see that correlation. I'm not going to say too much. What do you think about that? Do you think CNN is just the polar opposite of Fox News?
I tell those people to read. What I do say to those people, I tell them to turn off the telly and read. Why on earth can you imagine that you're getting information? It's not like the information we got when we were kids, which always was anyway funneled through, checks and balances, if you will, from, what we can say or not say. I mean, having been inside media, I do know that there are conversations about whether or not something can be published or broadcasted, and how that is, especially when you're with larger entities and powerful ones like the Times, how does that reflect on our society, on our security as a nation?
Sure.
I do think that, and I do say this, to turn off the television and read. I mean, especially with the internet, there's so many other sources of information that can also come from outside the U.S. Don't just
exactly. Now that kind of rhymes. That kind of rhymes with what I say. First of all, I don't think CNN is this propaganda machine for the left. I don't think so. I see in general that they are holding politicians responsible. They're trying to hold them responsible for what they say and do. And it just may appear that they are some sort of anti-right-wing news station, because I'm sorry to all of my right-wing listeners, if there are any, but I think that the current Republican Party is a bunch of thugs. I think they are a bunch of cowards. I think they're bowing to this leader that we have, that we've had for the last almost 4 years, and I believe that CNN is trying to hold those people responsible for their action or inaction. And then I say that to people, and then on top of that, I say, why are you only watching or listening to one news source? If you think that one side or the other is so far out of whack with what is current, why would you not analyze that, compare it to several news sources, and you might find that what you consider propaganda is just a reflection of what is right. And when I say right, I mean correct. Do you see what I'm saying? Several news sources, listening to reading several news sources, listening to several news sources can clear up a lot of this.
I read the right-wing stuff.
Sure.
I mean, I said I finished high school in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. That is certainly a red place. And I have multiple discussions, some of them more polite than others, with, former classmates who are incredibly anti-Obama and huge supporters of Trump. A really good friend of mine was integral in getting him, elected. I'll never forget the time she came to me right before he was starting to run, and she said, "Hey, can you help us with his website?" And I was like, "No." And
who is she? Is she somebody that people would, a name that people would recognize?
No, she was very, she's in a lot of the pictures in the background, but I don't feel comfortable mentioning her name unless I ask.
Okay, yeah.
She, from my perspective, when Simeon and I came back to the U.S. and everybody was laughing, this is, we came back in 2013, in the summer of 2013, and people were laughing. I don't think he had the nomination yet, had announced anything. So we knew, though, when we landed and we had conversations, that was the problem. The problem in the U.S. is nobody knew how to look around what was going on outside what they would do. And for us, it was so obvious that while everybody on the left was laughing and, he'll never get elected, we were going, you guys are so off. You are missing what's happening in this country. You're so caught up in your own little,
Well, sure. I think the worst thing... Well, sure. I think the worst thing that Hillary Clinton did was when she started with her comments about the basket of deplorables and whatnot. If she would have rather stretched out her hand to these people who felt disenfranchised and come up with a concrete plan on how to include them in her agenda, I do believe it would have been a totally different result. But she just wrote them. She wrote them off, and she assumed that Trump was such a horrible person that he could never win. She didn't have her ear to the ground. The entire Democratic Party did not have their ear to the ground.
No, I mean, I have to say that, so I'm that, 50 something woman, white, that everybody thinks would be waving either the Donald Trump or the Hillary Clinton flag. I was from the get-go a huge Bernie Sanders supporter.
Yeah.
That's me. Yeah. I really believe that having lived in so many countries as I have that are the balance between capital and social, I think that countries that do not take care of their people and give everyone a fair shake to healthcare and to education are not going to be successful, if you will, in the future. I remember when communism fell. So let's talk about what happened with communism. Communism fell mainly because the world was shifting from a political world to an economic world, and they needed to enter the economic game. And they were never going to be able to enter the economic game unless they let go of their so-called political structure. And that's when communism, quote unquote, fell. If you look at where, granted it's not the Soviet Union, if you look at where Russia is, it's a lot of the same players. They just had to rebrand themselves.
Yes, yeah.
Okay? So now let's look at the United States. So capitalism, which everyone thought was the winner in, the Cold War, look where capitalism has gotten us today. So look at the U.S., which is the king of capitalism, and you have more poverty, more children who are going hungry, families, not just the one guy who's had a rough break, got an alcoholic and is homeless. We're talking about families, full-on families, living in tents. I lived in San Diego. You go through, near the highway in San Diego. It's like Tent City was in Haiti after the earthquake.
It's like a whole neighborhood living under some of these bridge overpasses.
You have so much poverty.
Yeah.
You have so much sickness. Let's talk about sickness. We are talking about people who do not get any type of medication or even, whether it's addiction or not addiction or mental health or whatnot, that have nowhere to turn, no support structure. They can be absolute positive members of society with a little bit of little bit of violence, with maybe a little bit of meds. Who knows? But
you know what I think is sad? So I'm sorry to jump in here. I just got to throw this point in there. You know what I think is very sad? It's bad enough that people are living in those conditions, but what really is sad is the breakdown of what it means to be an American, because I hear so many of our fellow Americans say they don't care. If you're in that situation, it's your fault. If you're in that situation, take a hold of the American dream and pull yourself out of there. It's not my responsibility. It's not my responsibility to pay for your health care, pay for your way out of poverty. I hear that so much, and it breaks my heart. That's not what being an American is all about. I thought we were supposed to stand together.
No, but let's talk about capitalism again here, because capitalism is really, remember the 80s, remember the meat generation, it's all about how much I can get for meat. So we're going again, everything happens over generational. It's not like an idea that just happened and that's where we flipped in the day and the night. No, this is over time. So what has happened is you have a few generations, a couple who have this me, I got to get mine, I need more. And what that does is you lose empathy. You lose the compassion for the other person. So you think, I did. Okay, let's talk about, I did it. Okay, me. I was a single mom. I was pregnant at 19, gave birth at 20. I was on welfare. I was not educated, right? Hadn't started college.
No.
And if anyone can say, pull yourself up. I did. I went from that to being an executive with the New York Times. I think I paid off in 1 year taxes what I received in 4 years on welfare, right? And, so I paid back.
You paid back.
I paid back. I was on the dole. I paid back. I cashed the food stamps. I know what Wick cheese tastes like, okay?
Yummy. Have you had Wick peanut butter, though?
That's where I draw my line.
You haven't had.
like 5 boxes of macaroni and cheese and survive on that for a week.
So you've been there.
Been there. And I mean, I do think that once we lose as a society compassion for one another, and that includes...
And that's what's happening. I think we're in the middle of that right now.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what happened. And I don't think that you can say that it's capitalism to blame. I think it's the mishandling. This gets back to what you said about what's going on in our Congress. It's not just the president. It's not just one man, because everyone knows that one man is really a puppet. And a lot of action is going on in the background. Yeah. And yes, the DNC screwed up in a big way. At least Donald Trump, at least the GOP allowed their people to choose their first candidate, right? That's what I say. They got what they wanted. But let's talk about Congress. Let's talk about Mitch McConnell. Let's talk about real people who sold out and are supposed to be representatives and who have sold out the American public and are and it's not even like they're in the pockets of the corporations, because they basically are owners. They're stockholders in the corporation.
Exactly. And what I was going to say, because, some people on the right would say, well, if you don't like this, then vote. And, we voted, but our representatives are still, Mitch McConnell is still there. But I say the voting process has become so twisted and corrupted with a couple of things, with gerrymandering. Good Lord, the Republicans are so good at that, doing the gerrymandering game to their advantage. So gerrymandering, but also this thing where in Kentucky, now I hope I don't get these numbers mixed up, but I believe they went from over 100,000 voting polling stations down to less than 30,000. They cut away people's opportunity to cast their vote. And I think about if you're sick, if you're elderly, or especially now in these times of COVID, it must be hell to try and cast your vote in Kentucky. Why are these Republican-led states doing things like that? Because it's to their advantage. That's why.
Let's just say it like it is. The GOP are much more strategic. They know how to fight. They know how to plan. Their PR is so superior to the DNC. Yeah. The Democrats,
Are the Democrats too nice? Are they too soft? Because the Republicans are playing hardball. The Republicans, they know if we shut down polling stations, that's going to make it harder for mostly Democratic voters to vote. So that's exactly what we're going to do, and they do it, and they do it effectively. They're kind of callous. They're kind of hard-hearted. They're not afraid to toe the line, that narrow line between constitutional and unconstitutional. They're taking advantage of the Voting Rights Act of 1964 being kind of torn to shreds over the last few years. They're taking advantage of that. It's rather cold-hearted. It's very cynical. It's not very American, but they're doing it. Should the Democrats play that game a little bit better and be a little bit harder? A little bit tougher, a little bit more callous?
Well, I think that the Democrats themselves are, much like the Republicans have kept going more and more right. The Democrats are more and more left. I think what we're missing is much more of that centrist thought.
Does that mean a third party?
Oh, 100%. 100% do we need a third party.
I agree.
The split I don't think is healthy. Even in business, let's take business. You know what? You never have a company where one person has 50% and the other one has 50%. Yeah. It doesn't work.
No.
You have to have at least one of them have 51%. Otherwise, this is what's, yes, third party, huge proponent of third party. I also think that this is maybe, I don't know. I do think that every country has its time. And the U.S. had its time after World War II when it went to, a two-pillar, politically anyways, the world became, it was a two-pillar society globally. And I do think that the U.S. did lose its footing. It lost its manufacturing. It was really about being cheap for the populace, so that the same people keep getting elected. It didn't look at the big picture.
No.
We're a young country. We want it now. It's like reality. We want our 15 minutes of fame. We want the payout right away. I want to be a startup so I can sell it for $1 billion. All of that, quick. There's not the long strategy. There's not the long term of where we're going. So I think the U.S. kind of has lost its footing significantly.
So who has the good footing now?
Also, the fact that we put all of our taxes in a military complex.
Yes.
And that came out of the mouths, that came out of the education, that came out of I couldn't believe it after being a decade away, coming back to the U.S. and looking at the infrastructure. So what the hell? What happened here? Everything was dilapidated.
I see it too. I've been in Norway for almost 20 years, and I've only been back to the States a handful of times, not even 5 times, maybe 4 times I've been home in 20 years. And it's like each time I get back there, I see that degradation. I see it.
So I flew into JFK, right? Oslo to JFK, which is what? How long is the flight? 10, 11 hours? Maybe?
Roughly.
Something like that. So I land at JFK, and we're talking JFK. We're not talking, we're talking JFK, right?
Yeah.
New York City, main airport. And it took me, there was so much infrastructure delays just to get into the city. It took me like 4 hours. It took me longer to get home.
That's pathetic.
In Manhattan than the actual flight almost. It was just insane. We had to get off. The subway wasn't working. We waited for hours, and then it came. And then, I'm a startup, so I'm always taking the train. I'm not doing the And let me tell you that it was so frustrating. So the infrastructure was just so shockingly horrific. And all of the money is going to this military complex. And the worst part of it, what really irritates me is what it's done to the citizens. So if you look at other countries, and when the citizens finally stood up and said, "Hey, enough," it was because they had nothing. But they also were the first ones who wanted to participate in any type of, aggressive act.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when people are always saying, "Oh, thank you for," someone said the other day, their son was serving. "Thank you for serving and keeping us safe here in the U.S." And I was just like, wow. Because for me, I feel like those in charge are using hostile acts in other countries and are using some of the people who really need a break as fodder.
I see. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm just like, no, stop.
Well, I think a lot of this comes from perspective. I know for me, being an expat and living here in Norway, and like I said, every time I would go back home, I would see, I was witness to the downfall of at least the infrastructure, the roads, bridges, airports, and all that kind of stuff. And so that comes of perspective. And I wonder if the average American, not expats, but Americans living on American soil, I wonder if they are, to a certain degree, blind for what's going on, or rather accepting of what's going on. Maybe they see it, but they just accept it.
The majority have no idea at how the rest of the world has actually, in technology, has gone ahead. So what you hear a lot in the U.S. is, we have at least our freedoms. Now, I have to tell you that I don't feel free in the U.S. So my son has autism. And one of my biggest fears when I went back to the U.S. was that he wasn't going to react accordingly to any type of demands by the police force. And I even had, we lived in a small little island in Coronado. And so when we first moved there, we even went, to the police and said, "Oh, it's my son. He's on the spectrum. He's probably going to ask you if you tell him to stop. Why? Because he wants to understand everything."
Yeah.
And that was a big fear for me. I mean, I know, I heard your Coming Home podcast, the other, the one you did on what's happening in racism in the U.S., which is a whole other subject that people do not understand, that it's systematic, and they say it's not a problem, which is so baffling to me. But, you're a big black guy, so you know what that fear is. You're free in Norway. You're not worried.
Exactly. People talk about
them in the U.S. When you get out of the U.S. and you're free. If you fall down and break your arm, you're not going to go bankrupt.
Exactly. I'm a living example of that, in the sense that, like you said, I'm this big black guy, and being a big black guy in any kind of situation with the police in the United States, I will fear for my safety. I will. And no one can tell me that I shouldn't, because I was a police officer for 7 years in the States. I know I know the mindset. Okay. And yet they say I'm free in the States, but here in Norway, that's not an issue. It's not, I don't fear for my physical safety. Of course, the police have problems here in Norway. None of them are perfect. Of course, some of them may have some sort of racial bias, but I don't fear for my life. There's not a culture for that here in Norway, but there is in the United States, the land of the free. And
when were you a policeman there?
From 96 till 2002.
So you know what happened after 2002, right? So after when, I think it might have even happened prior to that. So a lot of the training that takes place with the police forces kind of shifted into more urban training.
Yes,
so
of course, yeah.
Training for Israelis, actually, who are used to urban warfare, training the U.S. police force.
Well, and that word warfare and police, to me, it just doesn't jive, but it is being used. I'm sorry?
That's when, remember the whole dialogue about to serve and protect?
Exactly, yeah.
It shifted away from that when they were being trained more from anti-terrorist urban warfare.
I was interviewed by a newspaper in Seattle a couple of weeks ago, and that journalist asked me about this whole warrior type of thing when it's applied to police work. And I said, if you're going to use the word warrior when in any kind of correlation with police work, then the word peace should come before it. In other words, you are a peace warrior. You are a warrior for peace as a police officer. And again, that goes back to the old adage, serve and protect. But these days, and again, this was back when I was a police officer, it's very common for us to refer to ourselves as peace warriors. But now today you see this militarizing of the police. They're wearing, the Kevlar vest. They're wearing, they have the armored vehicles and whatnot, and you hear them. They say this themselves, that it's like war in the streets of the United States. I don't see any place for the police to be conducting war or warlike actions against American citizens, and I think that is at the core of the problem in the modern police, in the modern policing in the United States. They need reforms, and the first reform they need is to change the attitude of the police officers themselves. They are not there to conduct war or any warlike operations. They are there.
Well, I think it's a direct result of the risks that are forming. So if you read, for instance, every year the Pentagon sends out, and it's accessible. You can, if people read and want to research and actually find something out there. The major risks in the U.S. are from groups within the U.S. Kind of what we're seeing now, more of these. I'm not talking about what's happening in the riots, and I'm talking about the right-wing, anti-governmental, these groups, and a lot of the worry in the administration or from the Pentagon, at least what's been released, is a result of also climate change, because you're having a lot of issues with hunger. You're going to have a lot of issues with migration as well. as a result of climate change. So a lot of the tactics, and obviously after 9/11, there was the terrorism. So that was a big industry, is a big industry. And over the time, when you are doing things like targeted killing, which all of the presidents, including Obama, was his numbers on targeted killing were pretty high.
Yeah.
You are basically many countries, and I'm not saying that there are not players out there who don't like the U.S. or are doing terrorist acts against the U.S. both outside and inside as well. But the world has changed so much that even internally the police force has had to become much more militarized. But the problem with that is that it's like privacy. So do you take everyone's privacy away because you're worried about the whatever number of, in the same with the militarization of the police force? Are you so worried about the odd issues that you've basically trained the entire police forces across the United States to look at every member of society as a potential threat?
Yeah.
As opposed to, and obviously in different areas,
Sure.
The black guy is a bigger threat, but even someone who has a child on the spectrum with autism, if you don't respond according to the way they want you to, you are at risk of losing your life. And the problem is there's no recourse.
Exactly. There seems to be no more nuance. Either you're cooperating with the police or you're not. And if you're not, and if you're not, any type of physical violence that the police put on you is justified. And there's something wrong with that. There's no, I don't know. Whew, that's a heavy discussion. No, go ahead.
I don't think defunding the police is the way to go.
I would say refunding. I would say, and when I say refund, I mean just wipe the budget clean and then reapply that budget and make it more compassionate, make it more realistic. If you take X number of dollars away from police forces, and stop buying them these armored vehicles and put X number of dollars into mental health care, I guarantee you there will be less need for those armored vehicles because of the mental health issue being dealt with. For example, if there was X number of dollars taken away from the police force and put into building up some of these inner city neighborhoods without gentrifying them, I'm talking build them up and do something, that's a long process, a long discussion, but build them up and do something so that those people who live in those neighborhoods have a little bit of hope, like every other American has a little bit of hope. Do something with the infrastructure, busing, subway, train system, something, so that these people, if the jobs aren't there, they can get to where the jobs are. If they would put money into things like that, they will then begin to build up these inner city neighborhoods, which will then require less policing. And that opens the door for a better relationship with the police.
Well, I agree with you 100%. I think that the issue is bigger than the police. I do think that, the fundamental issue is the U.S. has never dealt with its history.
No, never. Well, look at everyone arguing about systemic racism. That's right there is something.
100% systemic racism. Being married to a South African, I think he was maybe 20 when the change, when apartheid ended in South Africa. And, what happened there was a conversation.
Yeah.
So when the changes took place, it wasn't, Mandela refused for a long time to do to join anything until it was a systemic change.
Yes.
It had to be across every aspect of South African society. And the fact that you had people in courtrooms and coming in and saying, this is what you did, I'm sorry, this is, the reparations that took place, which I'm not saying, South Africa clearly today has its own issues. And
Sure.
But they addressed it.
They at least had the conversation.
They had the conversation and they addressed it. And I really, I have this is for me something kind of, I don't understand. I just, how your mind just doesn't understand. It doesn't grasp it. So I have a couple of friends of mine. So one woman actually, she also had a situation that her, we found it, I'm trying to find the right word. So she's from Kentucky, or lived in Kentucky at some time. And we formed a group, a nonprofit together called I Stand Parental Network. And it's for parents who have gone through international custody disputes or lost their child because the other partner kidnapped the child and went back to their home country.
Okay.
So she was, so something another issue I'm very familiar with. So she basically had her child kidnapped from her ex, who was from Mali, and took the girl to Mali. And she couldn't get her girl. It was like his visitation, but he left the country, kidnapped her. And so that was a big issue. And unfortunately, she didn't get to see her daughter for a couple of years. Mitch McConnell actually was integral in her getting her child back.
Okay. Huh. Interesting.
And she's a Black American woman. She had a bout with drugs. She, got her PhD. I mean, it's all out there. You can research her. Noelle Hunter is her name. She's a dear friend. And she actually, and this is where Mitch was very...
Would you say her name was Noelle Hunter?
Dr. Noelle Hunter.
Okay.
And you should have her on your podcast too.
I'm writing her name down right now.
Brilliant. I just love her to death. So he actually, after he helped her get her daughter back into the U.S., and he went to her and said, hey, I'm running for office again. Can you help? So she was a part of his campaign. And here's a Black woman from Kentucky, former drug addict, got her PhD. She's like the perfect person to present that community that you probably don't have the vote if you're Mitch McConnell. Anyways, long story short, she and we have this group that we formed. I'm not very active because I have a company now to run, but she keeps it going with other members of the group who've also been through circumstances like losing their child to the opposite.
What's the name of the group again?
The group is called I Stand Parental Network. It's a nonprofit, registered C3, not C3PO, but a registered nonprofit. Anyway, so my point is, what I was getting to, so she and another friend of mine, who rest in peace, an amazing guy, was my cameraman quite a bit. We were sitting together, and they said to me, Liane, and they're, he's also African American, and he's like, Liane, you're the only person, or actually, no, I wasn't even there. They were having a conversation about me. I think I'd gone to the loo or something. And I came back and I'm like, what? And they said, oh, we were just saying that you're the only white person we know that never talked down at us. That we never felt anything.
Right.
And I'm like, what do you mean, anything? What do you mean? They said, yeah, in the U.S., it's like this. And, my mother's not American, so, she's German. And I grew up in California, like I said, and I don't recall ever having conversations or questions or remarks. I just didn't even see color, So I think the problem in the U.S. is that there is so much divide and so many people who have been who have been brainwashed or told through generations that there's difference.
Well, I think people need to open.
and we've never addressed what happened with slavery and all of this stuff. So the U.S. has to own that.
And I think people as individuals need to open their eyes a little bit wider. You know, you talk of your time when you were younger where you can't recall ever having that conversation or anything. And that's understandable, but people do grow. You do get, you know, you eventually you'll have that black friend who will tell you of their experience, or you'll have that conversation with a total stranger and they'll tell you that they have had certain experiences. And the problem is that individuals will deny that. You know, they'll hear it and they won't take it as a new piece of information. They take it as a new piece of propaganda, or they take it as a new, just something that contradicts their own thoughts on what that issue is. People are afraid of any kind of outside influence on their own personal thinking. And that closes the door on any conversation. It closes the door on any kind of national healing.
I don't think any white person can say it doesn't exist. I don't think any white person can say that, oh, this isn't a problem. And why is that? Is because unless you walked in the shoes of somebody, then how do you know?
I had a friend from high school just yesterday. It's an old comment that I made on my Facebook page about 2 weeks ago, in reference to the social unrest and the racial unrest in the United States. And a guy that I went to high school with in this tiny little rural Ohio town, where I was one of less than a handful of black guys at that school, he knows what I was exposed to. He knows what was said and what was done. And yet on that Facebook message that I posted, he literally denied that I had experienced racism. And it's like, you're not a stranger. You know me from high school. So I don't know. I think there's this thing where some white people, they just go on the defensive whenever the subject comes up, and there's no need for that. I don't think anything, there should be no such thing as white guilt. And if I were to tell,
I also think that,
if I were to tell someone that they were displaying white guilt, they would probably get pretty pissed at me. But I'm saying that there should be no such thing. In other words, white people shouldn't feel guilty about what happened in the past. But what they should feel bad about is if they are not an ally in the present situation.
Yeah. No, and I agree. I mean, as I said, I went to high school in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and there was, I think, one black family there, right? Mm-hmm. And so the woman, we're obviously now Facebook friends because everybody finds their friends over Facebook. Yeah. So Cecile Moore is her name, and she posted something about how a little bit about just recently, a little bit about what she went through in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, is like the only black family, and I was appalled by some of the comments. For her it was brave. She still lives there, I think. And she actually.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. That's very brave, considering that there's almost.
Went back. I don't know, for certain. But someone commented like, "Well, I think you need to put behind you the pain, so that." I get those words, but they were kind of not allowing her to own the hurt that she experienced. They were just saying, well, you need to get over it. Yeah, and not in a way that was like, yes, it doesn't mean that she doesn't like all white people because she had, horrific circumstances or, had racist comments to her, but allow her to at least say, probably wasn't a picnic growing up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho in the 70s as the only black family.
Yeah. Well, to me, it's just a cold, callous, just a cold-hearted thing when people don't acknowledge another person's reality.
And it doesn't matter what that reality is, I think.
I'm sorry?
I think it also, like I was saying, if you haven't, when we talk about comedy, right? So I 100% want your guidance, because my next iteration of myself, I want to do stand-up comedy, and I'm actually, because my son has autism, I have a lot of material that's really not funny, but is really funny, and
but you can use that. You can use that. I joke about my son's death from a heroin overdose. So yeah. I think it's perfectly legitimate. I mean, there's something therapeutic about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it gets to walking through those shoes. Nobody can talk to you about what it's like to lose their child, to whatever cause, unless they've done that. Exactly. And the same with whether you're white, whether you're black. I mean, I think, the only white girl working at BET in Northeast Washington, D.C.
Now come on now there's a lot of comedic material in that. Absolutely. You've got to
that white bitch that that nobody's gonna like.
You've got to use that. If you get started in comedy, you've got to use that. There's a lot of material right there.
Yeah, I'm waiting to be a little bit older, so I'm not such a hottie anymore.
I see her over video here for all you listeners out there. I can see her.
Yeah, I'm told I'm scary on the phone, but if you see all the expressions I create, then you get that I'm not as scary in person.
No, you're not scary. This is a great conversation.
Getting back, I mean, it wasn't easy in fact, the only job I think I really failed at was being a teleprompt operator at BET, when the anchor, I had to feed the paper back then. It wasn't digital. You had to feed and it got stuck, and she had it at me thinking I did it on purpose.
Oh, wow.
No. Wow. Anyway, I don't think it helped that I was dating the director either.
Oh, wow. Now this sounds like a good script for some reality TV.
But yeah, I think, getting back to what we're talking about, I do think that the U.S. really maybe needs to go ask itself how do we want to be, and reverse engineer how to get there. Yeah. Because we have so many issues. The way we spend our money. I think Congress needs to have term limits. Please, can we just?
Oh gosh, that would be so nice.
That is the fundamental problem. It's not the president, it's Congress.
It's Congress.
We need to change what's going on in the way the country is run.
Well, if Congress was doing their job, then the president wouldn't be allowed to do all these foolish acts that he's doing, these destructive, foolish, and childish acts, because Congress is supposed to hold him accountable, and they're not doing that job. And I think I'm sorry?
And you think what?
No, I was going to say, and I think term limits would kind of kickstart this oversight process, because they are so intent on keeping that position as a senator or a congressman or woman for as long as they can. But if there were term limits, then they would give these people a different motivation, and maybe it would kickstart that process of oversight.
I think 100%. I agree with you, and I think that if the people want to really demand change, it's there's a saying in Hebrew that the fish stinks from the head first, right? So we know that the head stinks, but it's a big chunk of the rest of the gills and the bones that are the fundamental problem right now in the U.S. And I think that if we were to take back our country, it's about changing what's going on in Congress. There should be term limits. There should be, there's no reason that a lot of the gerrymandering is happening, because it's all rigged. The system is so
absolutely,
and that's what needs to change. And my hope, because I know we're talking a lot of negatives here, but where do I find hope? I find hope in what happened at TikTok the other day, in what happened in Tulsa, that they all bought new seats.
Oh yeah, yes, yeah.
I have hope in people, who the youth. My daughter. I said we were living in Coronado before we came here, and my daughter was one of the organizers on the march out about gun violence. Okay. Now, imagine you asking your children this. Hey, so you grew up, the first 10 years of your life in Israel where you had to run into the bomb shelters because of flying missiles. And now you've grown up to a few years in the United States where you have to constantly go under your desk and do, oh my God, there's a lunatic coming to shoot me drills. So which one do you prefer?
Yeah.
And kids say, I prefer the missile because it's not personal. And we had two lockdowns in Coronado in the 3 years I was there.
Really?
Yeah. And, nothing happened, but there was reason. Somebody broke up, they're in their car with a gun,
Okay. I see.
It's also Coronado, so there are a lot of military, there's a lot of people who have access with guns. It's also very, GOP based. And I just remember thinking, do I want to raise my kids here? So getting back to the U.S., the hope, the problems we all know. There's so many problems.
Sure.
Education. We really need to start with education and get Betsy DeVos out. But mental health, huge. Healthcare in general should be for everyone. Education should be for everyone. But I also fundamentally think that how can we use the next generation? How can the next generation look around and say, okay, we know where we are now. How do we want to be, and where do we want to be in 10 years from now? And these are the steps. Like when you do things, you reverse engineer. How do we get to that point? How can we be more compassionate? How can we be more equal? Because all the people who are saying, "Oh, I don't want to pay for all those welfarers," then ultimately they're paying more.
Exactly.
Because, we're paying more for those. I know. I worked in every level 1 trauma center in the United States. I'm doing trauma except for Cook County, and I can tell you that if you were, the bills that were left to be paid by the taxpayers, because of the violence.
Yeah. That's costly. It's costly. Yep.
And that's the other thing. Why is it that I go to Mexico to have my children get their braces for $1,200, and as opposed to doing it in the United States for $8,000? Why is it such a difference to buy, cream for my psoriasis that costs $400 in the U.S. and it's $14 in Mexico? It's insane what's happening with the pharmaceuticals as well.
There's something wrong with that. Let me ask you something. I mean, this has been a fascinating conversation. You are really, to me, you're a very intriguing person. There's the aspect of your background in journalism, but then there's also this entrepreneur, this startup lady that you are. If I can just touch before we wrap it up, I want to touch one more time on what you're doing now with Aquaai. Where does the road lead you? What are you looking for in the future of Aquaai right now? What's going to happen?
I know we didn't really speak much about Aquaai. You can see how that I actually really studied international relations and political science, and I get really wound up in.
Yeah, but it's a great thing to talk about. It's part of that discussion that needs to happen. So I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
I think when I look at Aquaai and what we're doing across the globe, a lot of what we're talking about today, I can address through using Aquaai as a vehicle for that. So for us, for instance, when you're looking at the superstorms that are taking place and flooding, which is happening globally, I can imagine, I would love to be able to be in a position one day that if something goes down and we need to have, what happens in flooding scenarios is after the flood, the water stagnates and then it becomes very toxic.
Yes, sewage and whatnot.
Yeah, the
chemical spills.
Chemicals. Look what happened to Houston after the last flood there.
Yeah.
I mean, reinsurers are sending out people. Sometimes they get, there have been deaths, So I can imagine using the Aquaai to be able to be deployed in a moment's notice in an area of flooding. Either, because we can swim through the debris, we can maybe help with search and rescue and finding people who need help, or after the fact as a post-disaster tool in understanding what the water quality is and the nutrient levels and whatnot. I can see Aquaai, monitoring ocean temperatures across the globe. Obviously, we're right now involved in, or maybe it's not obvious because I haven't said it, we're in Norway, mainly because we're working with sustainable fish farms. So we're working with Aquaai that supply Whole Foods with salmon. And Aquaai are leaders in sustainable farming. And by that, I mean leaders. I mean, they don't, their feed, everything from their feed to no pesticides, to the type of cages, to they are incredible protectors and being ocean warriors.
Yeah.
A term we like to use a lot are ocean warriors. So they're incredible ocean warriors, and they're providing, sustainable salmon to top Michelin chefs, to Whole Foods. And if we talk about briefly, about climate change and the future of food. So the planet, the way it's growing, at the pace it's growing, we will run out of food by 2050, right?
Yeah.
Because of climate change, because of the population increases. So already we have food security issues.
Yes.
Much more when we have terrorism. How are we going to feed all these people? There's migration that's taking place. So how are we going to feed? So everyone is looking around. We've already pretty much used up all the land mass. And, we've seen where that's gotten us, because you have a lot of disasters happening in the rivers that are flooding into the oceans, and that's where you're getting, all the corals dying, and everything is very circular. And if we're not protecting our waterways, I think it's something like 87% or 86% of the rivers in the U.S. are
scary.
My husband and my partner is much better at the stats. He nails them out like that, but. Yeah, so the water scenario in the U.S. is also just as horrific as in other places around, and it's increasing that way. And it's just a pity that places like, Nestle want to buy the water to sell it back to us. That's just crazy. So Aquaai, we're very active in looking at the best source of feeding the planet with the lowest carbon footprint.
And you think that would be fish farming, sustainable fish farming?
Sustainable aquaculture globally is, by the scientists, by the different, food security think tanks, they're all saying aquaculture is our best bet to feed the planet with the lowest carbon footprint. And only if we are cognizant about what we did incorrectly in agriculture, and use that as a warning sign so that when we do aquaculture, that we're sustainable. So what we're doing at Aquaai is we're enabling the farmers, the demand is there. They can't keep up with the demand. Yeah. So you have to do, everyone, trying to keep up, there's shortcuts, but how can we help them to make the smart decisions so those shortcuts are still sustainable?
Right.
In mind. So our robot are currently in the north of Norway near the Arctic Circle. They're monitoring the water quality. They're monitoring the health of the fish. They're making certain that the cages are clean and not, producing, too much algae or whatever. So we're really working to protect and feed the planet, protect the water, protect our oceans. But in the future, I see us being in freshwater more, because a lot of the problems are coming out of the rivers and in the ocean. I see us being global. I mean, again, getting back to the affordability of the robot. As a startup, your shareholders ask you, great, but where's the revenue? And one thing I say to all of our potential investors before they become investors, and because we're always raising money and all that to keep growing, is two things. One, we only use our technology for positive. We do not work with military. And two, there will be a day when we'll have to make a decision. Do we go right or left? Is right better for the environment, and is left going to make us more money? You need to understand that we're going to go in the direction that's better for the environment. Not saying that we can't make money, because we are making money. Yeah. But it might not be, the 400 billion. Maybe it'll be 300 billion.
How many employees? How many employees do you have now?
We're in the process of hiring. So COVID was, we've gone up and down depending on need and delivery and stuff. So we came to Norway. We opened a subsidiary in Norway at the end of last year, at the end of 2019, based because we had customer demand here, and we started to hire but stopped everything because of COVID. Part of our team is in the U.S. They're clearly not coming over now. And a lot of it's a financial question, as a startup. So we were significant we just received an Innovation Norway grant, which we're really happy about. They're supporting what we're doing.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We're hiring people right now.
What kind of positions?
Yeah, so we're looking for robotics programmers or people who are skilled in autonomous navigation, because our system, while you might have seen on the YouTube, you see it cord, so our systems are still autonomous. So we need people who can, program in like ROS, Python, C++, who can program autonomous navigation, as well as SLAM and machine learning. There's a lot of really cool IoT stuff going on right now. Even Alphabet is getting into the machine learning of aquaculture. We're working, as I said, with Kavari. They're also investors in the company, so we're fortunate there. Other investors in our company are Boost VC, Adam Draper, which is a very well-known venture capitalist family, the son of Tim Draper, Draper University, and other companies that are very successful. Arlen Hamilton, who you should also have on your show, is an investor. She is a woman who started out in production. She's a Black lesbian female who kind of just went to Silicon Valley and said, I'm going to be a venture capitalist. I think she slept on the airport floor for months and months and months before she got her first investment.
Wow.
I met her on Twitter. She started doing that when I started my company. So I was like inspired, like, hey, really cool what you're doing. And then when she finally, got some investment monies, she invested in Aquaai. So
what's her name again?
Her name is Arlen Hamilton.
I'm sorry, the first name again?
Arlen. Arlan. Hamilton. Yeah. And she was on the cover of Fast Company as like, she only invests in underestimated founders. So LGBTQ, females.
I see. Yeah.
She's actually working, one of her latest LPs is Mark Cuban. I know I think even something with Celine Williams and maybe Magic Johnson invested in one of her portfolio companies. I don't know if she helped with that deal or not, but she's a huge advocate of helping, underestimated founders.
So you're connected to this, it sounds like a very influential network of investors or potential investors. So that
I'm not, she is.
Well, but then you're connected through, I'm just.
I'm going to be humble here. I actually just posted on Facebook today, you can check, it's 2 years ago today that she and I had a conversation in San Diego as a keynote at San Diego Startup Week, where she was the keynote and I was the interviewer of Arlen. So you can see that as well. But
interesting.
Yeah. So if you look at, we have been able to successfully get some investment by unique people, clearly people who are a little bit different than the rest, I would say. Yeah. They get us as people, they get our grit, they get our passion, they like the tech.
Yeah, because I was going to say, because Aquaai is a little bit different. I mean, it's not your average startup. Like I said, I'm fascinated with what you guys are doing, and your focus is on such an important issue, keeping the ocean clean, sustainable protein production, through these fish farms and whatnot. So you guys are, of course the money making thing is one thing, but you guys are just doing a good hearted effort towards making the world better. That's the way I see it anyway.
I mean, it's frustrating at times too, I'll be honest. There's a lot of people who want to talk about sustainability or talk about impact investing that really aren't. So, right now the way it is, if you're doing a DARPA project, you'll get, or something where the government can maybe use your technology in a militaristic way, you'll get funded. If you're doing something like what we're doing, where that's like a deal breaker and it's really about positive impact, you're going to have a harder go at it.
I can see that, yeah. If you had a different focus or if you had a different motivation, this could very easily be sold to the military. I could picture the Navy. I mean, some kind of weaponized fish out there jacking up people and they would never see it coming. That's something that could be marketed to the military, but you choose not to do that. And I think that says something about your focus. It says something about your character, and it says something about where your heart is.
I think, it gets back to what we said at the beginning of our talk, which was, I think that both my partner and I had seen, some imagery, horrific pictures of society. And for us, it was really about doing something positive and not be proliferating more, harm in the name of whatever. So I think that we're really focused on that. But I really do wish that those who can, I know that, different entities and philanthropists, organizations do exist, but there's really not enough being done to help companies like ours to scale. There's a lot being done if you have an idea and it's on a napkin and you want to give 20%, 50% of your company away for a little bit of money in the beginning. But, we didn't do that. We bootstrapped for the most part with the help of I think about 20 angels and 3 VCs, GrowthX included. I should put them in as well. Will Bunker, who grew up on a catfish farm, he was the first VC who invested in us when we were only a year old, and he got it. But I think now we're at a phase where we're scaling, where we have orders, we have, MVP, most viable product, we have market penetration at the lowest hanging fruit, market, which is a great market to be in. It's a huge market, it's growing, I think almost 7% each year. So, the technology is solid, orders are there, but still to go from where we are to, a scale company, to get to the point where I said we want to be, there's not a lot of support there. There's not a lot of, investment going in there. They're like, come to us in a year come to us and, when you're doing a series. They
want to wait you out, and they want to see what you're able to do on your own before they commit to a larger investment.
Well, that's true in some sources, but the way it works is, we started 5 years ago. The first thing was, prove you can make a robotic fish. So we did. Then the next thing was, great. Now prove you can get customers, which we did. Now it's like, prove you can set up a production line. It's like every mountain you climb, there's another mountain. So
when it comes to the production line, is it just Simeon who is doing, the soldering or the hammer and nails or whatever? How many people are with him in the actual production of the units?
So the units themselves, we 3D print, like I said, our patents are in the mechanics and design, and we 3D print or SLS print what you see, the internal and the outer shell, which looks like the clownfish. Which our fish, by the way, is called Namu, named after the goddess of the sea. And so we have sensors and cameras. So we have 3 cameras on board and an array of sensors from oxygen, salinity, pH, temperature, depth, sonar. So the sensors we get off the shelf along with the cameras. So, we bring that in, and then everything is assembled in-house together. We have anywhere right now between 5 to 7. We've delivered, I think, 8 the units. We have orders for almost 90 this year. So we're hiring more people.
Okay.
We know it takes like 2 people 2 days to assemble a fish. So it's really about how many fish we now have to assemble and how many people we can afford to hire.
I see.
Build the fish. So,
But I would imagine when you hire them, they probably need a period of instruction to learn how to put Nemo together.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. Again, getting back to Simeon's, his mindset and the way he grew up. And also, he really wanted it to be so simple that the farmers could put it together.
Okay.
We needed to go to, his whole thing is about also teaching robotics. So he wanted to be able to have it so simplistic, not require a 200-page manual. It's very Lego. It's like IKEA, you just pictures, a few pictures, boom, boom, boom. Very
well, I was going to joke and say it's got to be more complicated than Simeon being in a garage with a roll of masking tape and a pair of scissors, maybe a hammer and nails. But it actually, from what you're saying, it's not really all that much more complicated than that, because because the a lot of the technology is already preformed, so it's just a matter of, in a way, plugging it in and putting it together.
Again, he has, 20, 25 years in manufacturing. So when he designed it with manufacturing simplicity in mind.
Very smart.
So that was very crucial.
Sure.
And also he wanted to be able to, that you didn't have to be a roboticist to put it together. You could be someone who, needed it for your village in Africa. What do I know? And put it together because there's, the water is rising, and you need to be able to know what's going on. So, still, the way we do it now is we assemble in-house. We do have people who obviously are skilled programmers, skilled electronic engineers. We're a very diverse international team. So, for instance, our guy who did all of our hardware, he's Italian. He works for NASA. He has some things up on Mars. On the rover, so he works for us and NASA. I love him to death. I'm trying to get him to stay permanently in Norway with us. He goes back and forth. We have Simeon, the South African. There's me, who's, for whatever, I'm American. I'm also, my mom's German. We have a guy who is from Turkey, who's skilled. He actually works was going to school during Katrina. Was living in New York at the time, and he helped him also. It's really important that we have people who are trying to help others and have some experience with, let's say, first responder aspects of them. He's also a skilled engineer, clearly. So he's new. He's actually going to start in July. He just graduated out of Stavanger. We just hired another guy who graduated from, I think it's Minnesota and Oslomet. So he's in Norway, just built his own drone on the water. So he's kind of a really, really good. I think he'll be a good addition to the team. We're hiring locally because of COVID. We do have a guy in a couple people in the U.S., as I said.
Speaking of locally, where is the location up in northern Norway that you mentioned? What's the name of it?
It's on Klare Indre.
I wonder, is that up in Troms?
It's lower. So it's south of Bodo.
South of Bodø? Okay, yeah. So Lofoten. Yeah, Lofoten. Yeah, Lofoten. Okay, yeah, up in that area.
Yeah, Lofoten, exactly. Yeah. So we do a lot of our building and testing there. We also, for now anyway, because I was doing a lot of traveling, we have also something more local in the area of Drammen as well. So we're, the thing I'm learning in Norway is that people don't like to travel so much.
Yeah.
So much. So it's hard finding some engineers. That's true.
I just love what you're doing. I'm gonna pay attention. I'm gonna be watching. I want to see what happens with Aquaai. I just think that.
If you know any programmers who are, like I said, we're hiring a very international, diverse group. I think I'm the CEO, so it's female led, so they have to be able to deal with that.
And unfortunately, some people have a problem with that. Unfortunately,
I don't know. I grew up with brothers. So I have a sister too, but I can relate really well to the guys, and stuff. But yeah, they have to be able to understand that.
How do you find investors for what you're doing? I mean, you're not sitting on a street corner with your hat in your hand asking for people to throw change at you, but it's kind of the same concept. How do you do that? Who do you figure out who to approach, and what do you say to them?
Well, a big part of being a successful journalist is getting access to an interview subject. So for me, getting back to what you asked, a while ago, how does that translate? So as a lot of journalists are actually very successful startup founders. And I think because a lot of those characteristics translate over. So, I camped out on one guy's porch for a week in Cuba to get that interview, which I ultimately got. And, we're still
persistent.
20 years later. I think getting access is important. So I know how to write a paragraph. I know how to write that email that says, hey, this is what I'm doing. That's how I got promoted. I sent a paragraph and said, a video, this is what we're doing. They're like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. So it's just about getting the access. Twitter, Arlen. I found Arlen on Twitter. Okay. I think also, Adam Draper, who invested in this, I send, I think, a good 4 years in a row, quarterly updates to specific people that I would like to invest in us.
I see.
After he read, consistency is key to any startup founder, and then seeing your journey, because you're right. They want to see if you can do it. You can have a great team, great tech, but if you don't have the chutzpah and the grit, then and a good market. So over time, he saw, wow, I would write emails to everyone from Wozniak to Bezos to Benioff. Hey, it's me again, robot fish lady. How you doing?
Yeah.
What's going on this quarter?
Well,
and some of them respond. I've had responses.
Well, that's very inspiring. I think that's inspiring for me as a podcaster, because I love doing podcasts. I mean, it puts me in contact with very cool and interesting people like yourself. But there's also that monetization aspect. How do I monetize this? And I like the inspiration that I'm getting from what you're saying. And it's basically just contact them. What's the worst thing they can say is it's no. They can say no, but just keep following up. Here's another episode that I did. What do you think? I had Dr. Howell Wexler. He was a former head of the Children's Health Division of the CDC. And he's
a journalist and a Peace Corps guy.
You know him.
I listened to your podcast.
Oh yeah, well, there you go. So he, after that podcast, that's so cool. You listen to that. I guess I'm not used to people listening to me, but I'm going to change that though. But after I was done with that episode with Howell, we talked for maybe another 15 minutes, and he suggested that I should try and get in touch with NPR radio and see if there might be some place for me there.
And not only NPR, you have NPR. So I worked on the Derek McGinty show out of DC. I don't think he still has a show anymore. The Diane Rehm show. When I was going to school at AMU, American University, which WAMU was on the campus then at the time, and you have NPR, you have American Public Radio. There are different, obviously the thing is that, and he's like probably closer to my age. So back when we were starting out, you had to pitch to them.
Yeah.
I collected my rejection. Actually, I had a friend of mine pitch for me because I was afraid of rejection, but he collected the rejection letter. You have to get used to, rejection. Even with investments, it's, I think every 1,000 no's you'll get a one. And trust me, I've had more than 1,000. My kids who are looking for jobs now, like, look, knock on 100 doors, and maybe you get an entry, a foot in the door somewhere as a job. And it's really a numbers game in terms of you don't need the NPRs or the New York Times or the ABCs of the world anymore. You can do all this on your own. That's the beauty about what's happening in the digital age.
Sure. I was going to say, I'm doing it on my own. I have the podcast, but that whole aspect of monetizing it, there is the challenge. If I was hired to do this for NPR or for American Public Radio or somebody like that, then the monetization is in the salary I would get for doing it. But podcasting on my own, yeah, my voice is getting out there. The voice of tens of thousands of podcasters is out there. But the problem... Excuse me? Huh?
You have a great voice.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I don't know. I'm just... Huh?
You should do radio. You have a great voice.
Oh, thank you. Well, anybody in the radio business out there, give me a shout.
Voiceover work too. I don't know if you're doing voiceover work, but you should. That's how you could be monetizing and making a living from your voice also. It's your voiceover work.
That's interesting that you mentioned that. I've done a couple of gigs for voiceover, and here just yesterday, I got an offer for a new gig. It's a Norwegian gentleman who's doing a television production, and he needs an American voice for a certain part of this production that he's doing. So I got that gig as well.
Yeah.
But that's cool. That's fun to be able to do that. But this whole thing with the podcast or potentially working in radio, I'm just trying to find who I can talk to, where I can go, how I can present what I can do. Because it's about having connections. I don't know anybody in that.
It's also about, this is, okay, we did a lot of USA bashing today. So yes. I feel that we need to give something back about what is also very unique and absolutely amazing about the States. And that is anyone can make it.
Yes.
Anyone. I know the playing field is not level. This I know. But there's still something very magical if you have a good idea, if you have a good format, if you have, it's not enough just to have the podcast and the connection. You got to have something that is unique, something that sets it apart, something that stands out. And if it's like that, it's like the reality TV, the things that the Duck Dynasties, these things were so unique because the people stood out. There was something special about them. So I think that also it's about identifying how your podcast is unique. What is it offering that is different from other podcasts? You see what I'm saying?
See, yeah, and there's a challenge there. There's a challenge there for me to be able to put words on that. I feel like what I'm doing is the greatest thing in the world. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it. But how do I vocalize that? How do I put that in black and white on a letter to the right person? There's the challenge. I have to try and pull myself out and look at this from the outside looking in, and I find that difficult so far.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the keys is to say, okay, this is my shtick. This is my form. This is what I'm.
But the way you approach that whole funding process or finding people to fund, what you're doing with Aquaai, that is inspiring to me because it's basically just stop thinking and just do it. Just approach people and see what happens. That's basically what it is.
And it is that. A lot of that is, being thick-skinned, and I'm not, but keep going at it. I do take it personal. One guy told me that he invests in lots of companies and can identify a great potential CEO, and I'm not one. And he's
boy, ouch!
And that hurt, And I was, that gave me fuel to my fire.
Yeah,
it was like I'm gonna say your name one day. That's not the day, but I'm gonna be there and I'm gonna say, this guy said this, and thank you for saying that because I wanted to prove you wrong. Yeah. So there is that. I think it's also being very targeted on where you go to find or do the homework. I think a lot of people don't want to do the work. Yeah. And I say, really do the research. This gets back to whether it's your country, your Congress people, the issues. Do your homework. Read and say, okay, who are the people who are investing in podcasts? Who are the ones who are really interested in getting the spoken word out, or whatever the format is, or whatever the focus is, know who that pool is. I made the mistake, and I just shot everywhere. I'm a startup. Everybody who gives money, come to me. And only after years did I learn to be more targeted in my shooting. And these are the people who do robotics.
Yeah.
All of that Silicon Valley crowd, 90% won't do hardware. Yeah. Why am I knocking on their door? And I used to take it personal. Well, maybe now you do hardware because I'm special. I saw everything sometimes as a personal challenge for good and bad. But yeah, so be targeted.
Yeah.
Understand your uniqueness.
And that, I think that's the biggest challenge. Again, I don't know. I'm working on how do I vocalize what I feel about what I can offer. I know what I can offer, but how do I put words on that? I know what kind of a radio show or what kind of a podcast I could have if I had the proper funding, which would then give me more time to put into the podcast. But, whether it's a podcast or a possible radio show, I know what I can do, but what's special about it and how do I vocalize that? How do I share that vision with the right person? So this is a challenge that I am looking forward to working out. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to be able to pitch myself eventually, sooner rather than later.
I think, it's interesting that some of I suffer from this too. I'm told it's not clear. Your pitch deck isn't clear. It needs to be. And I'm like, well, but I'm a communicator. I've got a lifetime of communicating.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're not the best communicator of our ability to communicate.
Yeah, if someone asks me what you're all about, what is Aquaai all about? Oh my gosh, I can describe that. I can do that. But if you ask me what my podcast is about, all of a sudden I'm stuttering and it's a totally different thing. It's that vantage point is what makes it difficult. The vantage point of being the thing you're trying to market. That's difficult.
Well, it's also it's a little bit different. Every step of the game as a startup, regardless of if you're putting, like Arlen putting together a VC fund or me, a robot, a podcast, there's steps.
Yeah.
And one of the first steps is being able to communicate your idea, which is different than the actual podcast. So, yes, there are pitch decks. There's so much information on YouTube and in Startup University and things like that you can learn how to just do a pitch deck. I'm happy to help you, with that. So the first step is how do I communicate my idea, whether it's a pitch deck or a pitch video or a pitch, 20-second bumper of your show with your voice, because it is such a fabulous voice.
Oh, thank you.
Or an element. My pitch decks have a video in it because I know that I can tell everyone robot fish, but until they see it, until they see the fish, pictures are 1,000 words, right?
Yeah,
So it's one of the steps.
You keep talking about my voice. Why is my wife always telling me to shut up? Be quiet. My voice is so nice.
It's not how you're saying it. It's what you say.
Ah.
Telling you to shut up.
I see. Okay. That explains a lot. Wow. No, I'm gonna work out that thing about how to pitch this, and that is one thing that I found out through my research. Doing like a 20-second, maybe a 30-second pitch of my podcast is a big step. The first step was having consistency, and I think I've got that. This episode I think will be number 40. So there's the consistency right there. So step one I've done. And then step 2 was making some sort of a pitch podcast, 30 seconds at the most. That's step 2. And then step 3 is finding the right place to send that pitch. So maybe you and I can talk after we sign off here, because I'm in a position now to where I can start sending myself out there.
Well, I tell you what, I help you on what I've learned, and you take, one of the main rules of startup world is gather information, no one's right, no one has a right way to do it. Take what resonates with you, throw the rest out.
It's very individual.
So, this is what I think. You got to trust your gut. That's numero uno, trust your gut.
Yeah.
So I help you with what I've learned, and you help me what you know in terms of being a stand-up comic.
Absolutely. And I think because you are a very good speaker, you speak in such a descriptive way, and you have a sense of humor, and that's a good combination. That's really all you need to start. So when you get ready to start, you just give me a holler. I can guide you through, or I can give you my suggestions on the writing process, where to get it from. I can give you you just say the word. I'll help you out with that.
And then like you, if I feel the urge, then I'll just be like, summertime.
Ah! There's a voice in there. There's a voice in there. Sing it, girl.
Fish are jumping and the cotton is high.
The Aquaai fish are jumping.
And they're monitoring the waterways of Norway.
Listen to you. Hey. Well, listen.
Mamu, don't you fly.
We should do Aquaai the musical, and you can have the starring role right there.
No, I actually, it's funny. So my eldest daughter, who's 35, she has an amazing operatic voice. My grandmother was an opera singer in Prague. I love opera. I can't stand musical theater. I mean, musical.
Yeah.
My other daughter, who is an amazing singer, has reverb in her voice. She's actually studying acting. She's here in Oslo with us. She's 18. You know of any acting gigs for an American 18-year-old? She would have it. But no, I think I'll save my little moments of joy singing for when I do comedy.
There you go. Yeah.
No high theater productions, no musical.
No, you let me know whenever you're interested in stand-up. I can help you maybe book a gig or two, or at least get you on an open mic to start out with. I think you'd be good at it.
I started studying music in college, and I was so horrified by the video of the playback that I changed my major to politics.
Well, my first love when it comes to art, my first love is music. That's, this stand-up thing is it seems to be the focus now, but that's just because that's just where my creativity is going right now, towards writing for my stand-up. But my first love is writing and performing music. That's my first love. First love is my music.
Is music?
Absolutely.
Well, I loved what I heard. I love, even my eldest daughter, so she sometimes performs at the Carnegie Club in New York City. She sings now jazz and blues, and, that's what I love. I loved when you sang the other night. And so if you do other shows, especially if you're doing shows in Drammen and stuff like that, when I'm down there.
Yeah, let me know. Let me know when you're in town. I was in Drammen last night, actually, here in Drammen at Union C. You know what? I bombed. But that's because, I was trying out new material, and that's what happens when you try out new material for the first time. And then I planned on the entire set being new material. And it was a small crowd. I think there was only 15 people out in the audience. So there was no damage done. It was, when I bomb, I think I've only bombed once, and it hurt my feelings, and I actually felt bad. The other times when I've bombed, I've enjoyed it because it taught me, okay, well, this material either A, isn't going to work, or B, if it's going to work, I need to remold it. I need to work on it. So it's part of the learning process. I don't mind when I bomb, and I quite frankly expect it when I'm working on new material. It's new. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to work. I have to try it.
That's interesting. So
you got to have guts. We talked about guts before. If you're going to do stand-up, you have to have a certain, it's a different kind of guts. You have to really, because the feedback, whether it's positive or negative, is literally in your face and literally instantaneous.
Well, I've had a gun in my head.
It's kind of like that. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like having a gun to your head.
I wonder if, I just, it's those insecurities. You can do all this really high risk stuff and, knock on 1,000 doors, but rejection is just a hard one.
But you know what, Liane? That is probably one of the top reasons why I do stand up. I've had some issues with rejection and with, oh, wow. Hi. Hello.
Hi. This is Max.
Hi, Max. For those who are listening, they are so sad for them that they can't see this beautiful image I see now of mother and daughter. Hi.
She was supposed to go to school in London, university in London, starting the fall, and unfortunately everything's online now because of COVID.
Yes,
so she's been on here with us, and she's, breaking in here, trying to meet people and, do some acting. And
well, you definitely have the look of an entertainer. You're quite beautiful. I'm just going to say that.
Her voice.
So what is your main thing you're trying to get into? Is it acting, or is it singing, or is it both? You'd like to be an actress. Yeah. Well, I have a 14-year-old daughter who's taking theater classes here locally, and I hope she makes it as an actress, because I know when I get old, I'm going to be very expensive. Adult diapers cost a lot. So my daughter needs to be a good actress. So maybe the two of you can hook up and carry each other along the way. Not that I expect you to be wearing adult diapers one day, but I
want you to support me when I'm old. Okay, nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you as well. Oh, how about that? That was a nice little cameo appearance. She's beautiful.
I know. See, I like to say I'm the oven. None of my kids look like me. I'm like this skinny, blonde, white, scrubby, bad hair life, not bad every day. So, my kids are these, kind of, they're all mixture of Middle Eastern and European, I guess.
Yeah.
Exotic, gorgeous. They look like I wish I looked, so I'm the oven. I like to say I'm just the oven.
No, I just want to say I didn't mean for this podcast to turn into like a counseling session for me and my podcast and all that stuff. But what I was getting at was that process, because I like talking to people who are faced with challenge and people who are trying to expand their horizon. And so that's why I started talking with you about that whole aspect of approaching people to sponsor your project, to invest in what you're doing. And that demands a certain amount of confidence in what you're doing. And that's part of what makes you an admirable person, the confidence that you have in the entire concept that is Aquaai. I think it's a beautiful and fascinating thing to watch. I barely know you, but I respect you so much just because of what you're doing. I mean, it's such a crazy thing to imagine someone designing a motorized fish. It sounds a little silly, but you guys are applying that in such a meaningful way. You guys are applying that in a way that is quite instrumental to keeping the production of protein which we need to survive. You're keeping that production honest. You're keeping it clean. You're monitoring what's happening, and that's vital. I think that's so important. So you're doing important work, and you're doing it quite well, and you're showing an immense amount of confidence. That whole process of grabbing up investors. It's fascinating to me. I am motivated by that.
Thank you. I'm glad it inspires. I always do things and think, well, if I can do it, anybody can. I don't ever, it gets back to what you said, though. I can sell what Simeon's doing because he's such a fantastic brain and the technology is so brilliant. What makes it even more brilliant is that it's so affordable. You can spend millions of dollars and it's being done. But what we've actually been able to achieve was to create an affordable system, which means it goes into the hands of many. And, we do make robots, but the idea is that we're a data company and we're gathering all this data and it's a full circle. So you our customers actually just log on to their computer, and a web dashboard pops up, and they get all the information. So the robot, we believe in proximity to the source and data acquisition. So the robot gets up close, whether it's in aquaculture and coral reefs and dams, or inspection or whatever the need is, and then the data goes to our back end, goes to the cloud, and then we push the information to our web dashboard that the customer logs into. So it's an end-to-end solution.
I was going to ask you about the cloud thing. Do you guys have your own cloud, or do you use a cloud service? Because we use a cloud service. Okay.
At the time,
yeah.
We have our own servers, but we do use a cloud service. A lot of what we're doing, so the robot sends and transmits the data either through a localized network, or just bounces it off, and it then goes to the cloud, to our backend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, again, Liane, I so much respect for what you're doing. It's fascinating work. I'm going to keep following the progress of your progress personally, and also Aquaai. I like to think that I have made a new friend.
You have made a new friend, and as you know, in Norway, it's kind of difficult to make new friends.
you know what? When I lived up north, we still have our home up in Finnmark on the island of Seiland, and up there, it's easy to get to know people. But here down south, there's a certain aloofness, there's a certain skepticism, a certain coldness that is it demands an effort to break through that and make new friends. That's a long way of saying I agree with you. It's hard to make friends here.
Same conversation I had an hour before we got on the call, because we work mostly in the north.
Yeah.
And, we're just like, I really miss the people in the north. I really love them.
It's totally different.
And when you're busy like we are, it's hard. You don't have the time to cultivate, but we try. We're very active with the ocean community here. Other players who are trying to do positive work in the ocean space, because we don't see ourselves just as an aquaculture company. We're, an ocean data robotics company. So, we try to get in. I think it's a beautiful country. I love the scenery. I love the political support that you get is a combination of capitalism and socialism.
The social services is what make this country the fantastic place that it is. I think of how I was able to spend the first 8, 9, 10 months of my daughter's life with her away from work, still getting paid, job was still there, and I could stay home with my daughter. And you just cannot do that in the United States. But here, because of the way the social services are set up, I was able to have that time with my daughter. Almost the entire first year of her life, she spent it almost exclusively with me. And it's a beautiful thing.
I agree. And I think that if the U.S. we'd have a better infrastructure with the family, the basis of families, if we were able to do that instead of 2 weeks or 3 weeks if you have a kid, and not at all if you're a guy.
Yeah.
But I do think that we should, really look at freedom around the world. In the U.S. should look at how other countries have achieved the combination of capitalism and socialism.
Yeah.
Israel in the same way. And we should look about how we can improve our own country, because true freedom is being able to pursue happiness and live in a way that you're not in fear.
Yeah.
From falling down or, from police brutality, whatever the case may be. So I have hope. I have hope the next generation sees that. And I've enjoyed our time talking. Thank you. I'm happy to help you any way I can.
Thank you.
So that
Thank you.
As well. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. I truly appreciate it. I'm glad to call you friend. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Liane Thompson. Thank you.
Ciao. Ciao.
Bye, everybody.
I'm coming home.